Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of Side Alpha Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, David Polikoff. I'm pleased to have on the phone a good friend of mine and co-host of the Politics and Tactics radio show, which is recorded through Fire Engineering Radio, Nick Pappa. Nick, why don't you introduce everybody to yourself?
How you doing, everyone? My name is Nick Pappa. I am a lieutenant with the New Britain, Connecticut Fire Department. For those of you who are not familiar with Connecticut, we're the first city west of Hartford, and we're the fourth most densely populated city in the state of Connecticut. It's a small New England mill city. We fairly densely populated, and our bread and butter fire is a 3-decker or 6-family ordinary constructed multiple dwelling. So that's with my working environment. I am a lieutenant on an engine company downtown, and I've been a company officer for 6.5 years now. I've been with the department total for about 13.5. And prior to that, I volunteered in a neighboring suburb where I grew up and became a second-generation firefighter. My dad is a retired deputy chief from that department. So I grew up in the firehouse and just fell in love with it, and just was one of those kids who wanted to be a fireman and just never grew out of it and never grew up. So that's my story, and I'm happy to unpack some leadership concepts that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And then for those of you that are listening, you can do a little bit of research. Nick has written several articles for Fire Engineering Magazine, as well as been a presenter for several years at FDIC, which is in Indianapolis. This year it's going to be in August, and I believe you're going back. That's correct? Am I correct?
Yes, that'll be correct. I'll be going back to teach my coordinating ventilation class. And for those of you who are puzzled at why an engine company officer is teaching a class on ventilation, it's not your typical ventilation class. It's the focus of my program is on how to successfully coordinate it to support extinguishment and also to support victim survivability. So we focus in on the fire behavior aspect, how ventilation works from a mechanical standpoint of what are the physics behind it, how does that fresh air move in, and how do we properly remove those hot gases and smoke, and redirect that fire to positively support that engine company that's making the push, or to support that search and rescue crew that's trying to locate those victims, and ultimately how to make the space more tenable for any potentially trapped victims that may be inside the structure, so we can increase their chances of survival. Because that's, at the end of the day, all of our actions should be dictated by that premise. So that's what the focus of my class is on. And I've been promoted off the ladder company, so I spent some time as a private working on a ladder company. So I went from being the one performing ventilation to being the one requesting it and being on the receiving end. So actually going back to the engine has given me a much more well-rounded insight as to how the tactic works and how it should be best coordinated to achieve its intended effect. So that's my class, and that's how I got started on the national teaching scene. And I've been actually shifting gears and getting back to what it is that I do now, which is engine company operations. So that's been my big focus, because that's what I do with my department. And I've had the pleasure of being involved in several projects to help improve our engine company operations department wide. So that's been my focus now, and looking forward to getting into some company officer leadership topics, because I've been in the seat now for 6.5 years, and I've learned some good lessons, some of them the hard way, and just some of them through good mentorship. So I'm excited to unpack that today.
Yeah, and being a line officer, a company officer, I remember, I had like no leadership training. Everything was kind of on the job for me. And you learned, through your mistakes and things that worked and things that didn't work, and that you hope that you process that, the good and the bad, and be able to use that later. It took me, I would say, within the last, and I hate to say it, maybe 6 years to really flip that switch of like, hey, I really need to dive more into the leadership stuff not just because I'm a battalion chief now and I'm responsible for, 7 stations, which have 7 captains, with a total of 72 people in the battalion, but more so of I need to make sure that my guys trust me and they respect me, not just the position. And how do you get that? How do you earn that? And I really started diving into that and talking to a ton of people and getting the perspective of not only just from military guys and from business leaders, but as well as it really has to start with when you get out of recruit class, you put your first year on, you start to become that firefighter. You need to start having some leader. You need to start learning some leadership skills. You need to start absorbing those traits, what people can expect from you, and what you should expect from your people. And so I'm pretty excited to hear it from the company officer's side. Somebody that's ridden a rescue, or sorry, somebody who's ridden a truck company as well as an engine company, and recognized that, hey, I used to do the ventilation. Now I need to call for it, but there's that coordination, and it doesn't matter if you're an engine guy or a truck guy. The communication and the coordination is key in order so you don't hurt people or make the fire worse or make conditions worse or pull the fire on top of victims and things like that. So, without going too heavy into tactics, let's go ahead and dive into your topics. You talked to me offline. You talked about control and influence, and so I'm going to let you go ahead and start working your way down. Starting, you can talk about the article that you wrote on your blog page and what you've learned and how you've adapted and where you are today. So go ahead.
Well, the first thing I really want to talk about is controlling the controllables. And what I mean by that is, as a company officer, or to be honest with you, no matter what position you're in, you have a certain sphere of influence and a certain amount that you can control. And that needs to be your focus. And a lot of people, myself included, have fallen into that trap of getting worked up with what everyone else is doing, or in most cases, what they're not doing. And they burn up a lot of energy and a lot of, put a lot of mental stress on themselves because they're worrying about things that they can't control. Now, whether that be other crews, whether that be the department as a whole, or just administratively, worry about what you can control. That is the best piece of advice I can give, especially to any new company officer. What you need to focus on is your crew. If you're a lieutenant, it's that crew. If you're a captain, it's your company. That should be your primary focus, because if you build a good, solid company, your results are gonna speak for themselves. When your crew develops that esprit de corps, when they develop that cohesion, and you start training together and developing higher levels of performance, that's going to spill over into the fire ground. And when your fires start going out faster than everyone else's, when you start beating other companies into their fires, not because you were being reckless and racing, but because you were better prepared and you turned out of the firehouse quicker, people are going to start to take notice. Yes, you're going to get some negative attention from, but again, remember, consider the source. That's another big lesson here is when the mutts tend to bark, again, consider the source. That's another big lesson that I've learned as I've grown just as a person and also as a company officer. But consider the source of where things are coming from. But hopefully, like as Dave, you and I spoke offline about this, but there's that you're influencing, or it's that peer pressure, which is often has that negative connotation, but the peer pressure could also be positive. You're positively influencing other people because you're putting pressure on them with your higher levels of performance, and now you're pushing them to want to step their game up. And that's how you can extend that influence beyond your crew. You're having that second, third hand effect, because if somebody's seeing, wow, Engine 1 Group A is beating other companies into their fires, their fires are going out with first line. they're going to start to say, well, what are they doing? Or there's no way I'm going to get beat to my fire, or, I want to have that same result in my fires. So if at the very least, if that's how you have that influence outside of your normal sphere of responsibility, then that's a win. Or if it doesn't, at the very least, you're doing your job and you're taking care of your crew, because at the end of the day, that's what you're responsible for, and that's what you can control. So anything outside of that that's just icing on the cake. So I think we all have at times, anybody that truly loves this job and cares about this job, and goes the extra mile, we tend to get wrapped up in people that don't feel the same way as we do. And the thing is that another thing that you have to remember, and this is another lesson I learned the hard way, is that not everybody is going to love the job or treat the job like you do. There are some people that this is just the job. And, as long as they are hitting the mark and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's okay. Because this isn't going to be a calling or a passion for everyone. But as long as they're doing their job, that's all we can truly ask of them. And, maybe if we, through our passion and our zeal and love for the job, hopefully we can, elevate that just a little bit, and maybe, infect that spirit into them through our actions and through our mindset. So, but the big thing is we just have to make sure that we're meeting the mark, we're meeting expectation, because that's what we're here for. We're here to protect life and property. And I think that's another thing that often gets lost in a lot of this, is the gravity of our responsibility, especially as company officers, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. I don't care if your administration is not doing their job, or you don't have the training resources, or insert whatever excuse or condition that you want to insert. But when it comes down to it, you are ultimately responsible for making sure that your crew is prepared to meet the mission, because when the bell hits, the public expects and demands you to fix their problem in a timely and effective manner, period. So that's the hallmark of the fire service, has always been our ability to adapt and overcome, sometimes to a fault, especially as we all feel the pinch of the financial constraints, and we're always being pushed to do the same with less. We tend to have that ability to adapt and overcome almost is our own demise. But that's what we have to do, because that's our job. We're civil servants. We're there to make sure that the public is protected. And that's what it all comes down to. So you need to figure out a way to make sure that job gets done, no matter what your circumstance, because no matter what's going on, those are all excuses, because when the rubber hits the road, there's no time for any of that. And the public doesn't care what you've had to overcome or what you're dealing with. They just want you to solve their problem, and you better be able to do it, because if you fall short of that, that's going to be your burden to bear for the rest of your life. And I think that we often forget of what this job is capable of throwing at us, and the true tragedy of what we could encounter. That next alarm, the next time that bell hits, could be that career fire where your decisions determine somebody's outcome, whether they live or whether they die. And I know that seems dramatic, but that's what fuels me. And because my first legitimate fire as a company officer was a fatal fire. We lost an 11-year-old boy at that fire. And despite our best efforts, and despite our 2-minute turnout time, from time of alarm to on-scene time, despite how quickly that line got stretched, and everything that we did to aggressively try and mitigate that incident, I genuinely feel that we gave that child the best chance of survival that we could. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's just not the forum for it. But even though I think we did everything that we could to affect to make up that outcome positive, it didn't. We got dealt a bad hand, and with this job, sometimes you're going to get dealt a losing hand. But a lot of times we have the ability to change that outcome, and you better be ready for it. And that's what drives me a lot, is that I know what this job is capable of throwing at you, and I don't ever want to look myself in the mirror and think to myself, I wasn't ready and I could have done more to change that outcome, because that incident was very challenging to get over. And, it's any time that there's a loss of life with a child involved, it's difficult. And especially one where it was so dynamic like this one, I know in my heart of hearts that there's nothing I could have done more to change that outcome. But, God help anybody that, can't say that, because, that's such a hard thing to get over as it is. But now you put in that guilt of you weren't prepared, or you didn't do what needed to be done to make that outcome a positive one. So that's what drives me. And that's what I try to get across to the people I come into contact with, because, training isn't always looked on as a positive thing. And, people that aren't into the job can often dread it. But that's what we're here for. And the only way you get good at anything in life is through practice, through training. And that is my biggest focus, because one of our foremost jobs as company officers is training. It's to make sure that our crews are prepared to face whatever it is the fireground's going to throw at us, so they can not only survive, and so that the people we're there to protect can survive, but we can also thrive. I want to be good at my job. I don't just want to go through the motions and get by. I want to be good at my job. And nothing in life comes without sacrifice, without work. So that's what this all boils down to. But having to instill that sense of urgency, that sense of purpose, and reminding people of what this job is truly all about. Again, that giving people the why behind why they're here, why we exist, why training is important. That's where the conversation needs to start. You can't just ramrod training down people's throats. You need to inspire them. And that's the bigger part of the company officer's job as well, is you need to inspire people. Because yes, you do have bars on your collar or bugles, depending on where you work. And yes, ultimately you can drive that train however you want. But in order to get true buy-in, to get people to truly believe in the mission, you have to inspire them.
Yeah, I think I took a bunch of notes while you were talking, because everything you're saying is spot on. Going back to your first call with the death of a child, yeah. You look back and you run through the whole incident. What could I have done different? What could I have done better? How could I have made a positive outcome? And once you kind of look at everything and said, we turned out of the firehouse correctly, we got out quickly, we were dressed, we were ready to go, we stretched the line, we caught a hydrant, we pushed inside, we got the fire knocked, but we still had this bad outcome. And it all goes back to one of the first things you said, is control the controllables, control what you can control. What could have made a better outcome? Maybe if somebody would have called 911 quicker. You can't change that as a firefighter. Maybe they should have had smoke detectors. We have these smoke detector blitzkrieg out into the neighborhoods about, we give them away for free. But if people don't take that, you can't control that. The best thing, like you said, is being able to look in the mirror and say, I did, and my crew did everything we could do to give that kid the best chance, and it still was a negative outcome. It's just like running a pediatric code, and we run these cardiac arrests in my county, and I listen to them, and right away I'm making sure that my guys are okay, but I know they've done everything that they can do, and sometimes the outcome's not good. One of the other things you talked about is, when you start performing, or your crews start performing really well, and people start to take notice in that, the old saying, haters are going to hate. There's nothing you can do about that. But like you and I talked about offline is, secretly they're mad because you're doing well and maybe their company's not. That's where you have to put ego in check. And those people have to be able to humble up and say, hey, what can I do to make my crew better? I noticed that your crew's doing really well. What are you doing? That goes a long way. And to be able to say, I want to make my guys better. How can I do that? That's a tough thing to do. Firefighters are very the one thing they hate to do is ask for help. So to ask for that help, how can I make my guys better? And start setting them on that path. You talked about how you have, there are some people out there that treat this like a job. And I know for the longest time, we would try to alienate those people, or, hey, this isn't the job for you because you don't love it as much as I do, and you don't live and breathe it, 24/7 like I do. But you're correct. There are people that this is their job. But as long as they're performing and meeting the expectations and doing their job correctly, and then they go home and they're just, a father or a husband or just a regular guy or girl, they don't eat and breathe the fire service, that's okay. As long as they are approaching the job and doing it flawlessly, giving 100%. And I think as a company officer, what you exude, if you exude this positive radiance of this job is great, this is the best job, and I love this job, some of that will kind of peel off onto these people that just look at it as a job, and they may get a little more into it, and they may not. But I think being a positive leader, putting out that positivity as opposed to being negative and trashing the organization all the time, you're going to go a lot further when people see that you truly care and are excited about the job. And one of the last things that I put down is, we talked about the financial hardship. The fire service seems like it's always in a financial hardship. Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what your tax base is. You could be one of the richest states in the country. You could be one of the poorest states in the country. It seems like the fire service is always wanting. We need more equipment. We need more firefighters. We need more training. And we seem to kind of roll up on the short end of the stick. But like you said, we still have to perform at 100% with the equipment that we have and the manpower that we have, regardless of what state our department's in. We can't make excuses like, well, I would love to be able to do better, but my fire engine's 15 years old, and it's an E1 instead of a Pierce, or we don't have good hooks, or we don't have 8-pound axes. It doesn't matter. You still have to perform and answer the 911 call, because the people that are calling 911 that are having a crisis at that moment, they don't care what you roll up in. They don't care what your equipment is. They want you to help them in their time of need. So there was a lot to unpack there, but everything you said, it truly deserves to be heard and to be dissected. So, I appreciate you throwing those out there, and let's continue to move forward. Keep going.
So the next thing I want to talk about too is, when I say to focus on your sphere of influence and control your controllables, I'm not saying to just throw your hands up in the air for some of the other things that may be beyond your normal, your normal lens. But it needs to be done tactfully, and there's a certain approach that you have to go about it in order to be successful. I encourage people to, if you see a problem, work on a solution. That's the big thing. As firemen, we're excellent at picking out problems and identifying issues. The thing that separates that from being productive or the good firefighters is the ones that are able to come up with solutions, or at least adaptations to overcome them. So one of the things that I was able to accomplish was that we got the hose. My crew was able to get the hose loads changed department wide, because a couple contracts ago we lost our 4-man minimum on the engine companies. So while we still have half of our companies are assigned with 4, the minimum staffing is now 3, which for anybody who's dealt with both sides of that knows how much of an operational detriment that is. That fourth member on the company is critical for that line being efficiently stretched and operated. So one of the things that we had to deal with was we had to accept the fact that that fourth firefighter was gone, and that we had to figure out a way to still get that line effectively. And while it'll never be as efficient because you simply are missing a body, that's, with a 4-person crew, if you're first due, you have 3 people on the line. That's a third loss in your staffing. That's tremendous. So you're never truly going to make up for that loss, but we can certainly lessen the blow of it. So that's where I was hell-bent, especially after that fire. While we didn't have issues with the line, I saw the need for expediency and the need for things to be done as efficiently as possible. Because despite how quickly we moved and how good we all performed, it didn't matter. And I never wanted that to happen, where the way we deployed was not conducive to that efficiency, and that had we done things differently, the outcome could have changed. So after that point, and when I was new to the engine, one of the first things I did was take the nozzle forward program with Aaron Fields, because I needed to get myself back in the engine company mindset, because coming off of the truck, I hadn't touched a stitch of hose in years. So now I needed to get myself back in that frame of mind. And also I was, shortly after that, when I got transferred, I received 2 probationary firefighters, one of which was a female. And although she was very athletic and extremely capable, she was, smaller statured. So I wanted to know everything I could about body mechanics and how to most effectively deploy and operate a hand line to make sure that she could be as successful as possible. Because I knew that, once that grace period of us riding with the 4-person crew while they were in their first couple of months to get them situated, that once we were back down to our normal 3-person staffing, it's inevitable that there's going to be times where she's going to have to operate that hand line without me being right up against her. Because without that third person, now the officer becomes not only the backup firefighter, but also that door firefighter, where you're that, as Tim Klett calls it, that roaming linebacker, getting more line, freeing up pinch points. So my biggest focus as an engine company officer, when I first get anybody new to my company, is to get them proficient in being able to flow water without somebody supporting them. So that was my big focus. And once I took that class, it was so eye-opening, and to, the lack of in-depth training that I had received on moving hand lines previously, and how much there was to unpack, and just how deep that rabbit hole was into not only just handline operations, but also, drilling and training, because anybody who's taken one of Aaron's classes knows how methodical he is. And there is a true system to how he to how his handlines are deployed and operated, but also the manner in which he trains, which I think is one of the biggest deficiencies in the fire service, is the lack of structure and the lack of methodology in the way in which we train and not only pass along knowledge, but more specifically also the skill acquisition piece. Because if you look at the other fields, especially when it comes to sport or music, for example, because I'm actually in the process of reading, I'm sure we'll touch on books later, but I'm reading this book, Peak, and it's all about how to obtain expertise, obtain expertise, and how the most premier people, whether they're athletes, whether they're musicians, whether no matter what the field, how they obtain that pinnacle of their field. And it's all about the methodology and what they call deliberate practice. So I just jumped in with both feet, and I made it my mission to try and figure out a system that would work for us. And that's another thing I want to convey, is you can't just lock, stock, and barrel take something that somebody else has done and try to to jam that square peg in your department's round hole, because not everything, just because something works somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to work exactly that way in your department. It's incumbent upon you to take that system and mold it and adapt it to fit your particular set of circumstances. And through a lot of trial and error, through a lot of research and development, and it took years. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. But eventually, we developed a system that works very well for the building stock that we have, for the staffing levels that we have, for the engine companies that we have. And I ended up going through 3 different chiefs, but eventually it got implemented. And my company's been very successful, and we've been fortunate to get to employ all those different techniques and operate in a pretty wide variety of different settings and circumstances where we were able to put it to practice. So it was no longer just theoretical. We were able to put it to practice, because I love that line. Knowledge without experience, or knowledge without it being applied, is just theory. And so having that practical experience and actually getting to put it to use in the field was tremendous, and actually proving its worth, because one of the most contentious things in the fire service is hose loads and hose beds. It's one of those funny things that people get very territorial and very funny about that. So that's one of the more difficult things to change, for sure, and it's something that definitely is still a hot button issue, for sure. But the proof's in the pudding, and it's going to take time. But the more fires that you get under your belt, the more successful outcomes that you achieve, it'll solidify and gain traction, and people will start to see its worth, because it's not just going to be, oh, that was happenstance, or they got lucky. It was when the results are consistent, there's no argument. But the way to go about achieving that level of change is, you first off have to have a good amount of leadership capital built up. And what I mean by that is, you have to have a good reputation and a good track record. You can't just come out of the woodwork with this, department-wide change that you want to implement. And if you haven't been, doing your job, or maybe, your house isn't clean. So you got to make sure that what you're responsible for is taken care of first and foremost. And then, making sure that any projects that you get involved with on top of that doesn't suffer. And it's just going to take time, and you're just going to have to introduce it very, very incrementally, and just work your way up that chain of command. And that's another big thing, is you have to follow that chain of command, because it's there for a reason. And if you want to be taken seriously, and making sure that the links in that chain between you and the chief, because that's ultimately who is going to sanction whatever it is that you're trying to get across, and make sure that their toes aren't stepped on. You got to make sure that you're working your way up, including them in the process. And to be honest with you, the more people that you run this by and get involved and pick their brain, whenever you're in deeply engrossed in something, you're very much married to it. So whether you're aware of it or not, we all can tend to have blinders and have that bias towards whatever it is we're doing, and that can develop blind spots. So when you have people that are impartial and have various different experiences, they may pick up on things that you just didn't see or didn't think of. So that's going to be the true litmus test. And if you're active, then you should be able to pass that crucible of, as you make your way through these different people and these different layers of the chain of command. If your system is solid and you've kind of thought about all those different variables and come up with those contingencies for those curveballs that those people are inevitably going to throw at you, whether they're trying to submarine it intentionally, or they're just playing devil's advocate and being real and testing out your solution to make sure it's going to hold water out in the field, that you're ready for those. And, it may take some going back to the drawing board and some, reformation. But if you want this to be truly successful, then, good things take time. So you just have to be patient. You have to be respectful. And you can't come at it. You can't be overzealous. And those of us who are very passionate about this job, can at times be overzealous. And that definitely has been one of my stumbling blocks over the years is, you care so much and that you want things to progress so bad that you can at times shoot yourself in the foot. So you just got to make sure that you're tempering that passion and you're making sure that you're doing things incrementally, including the right people, going through the proper channels. And if what you come up with is truly effective and it does have merit, it's going to stand on its own legs. You just have to take the time, do the work and just be patient. And one thing that I love that Rob Fisher, who's very much involved in the Fools group, he's a battalion chief up in the Pacific Northwest. But one thing that he says is it's 10% of 10% pressure 100% of the time. And what he means by that is you can't just come at people full bore because that's going to turn people off. And even if it's coming from a good place, they're just going to see it as you're just forcing something. But if you just have just that gradual, that presence, that gradual influence, but it's there all the time, they're eventually going to see that you got to play the long game. You're in it for the long haul. And it's going to be frustrating at times, but you just got to have that resilience, and you have to have that, that far sight focus and keep your eye on that, and just know that it's, like I said, anything worth doing is going to take time and it's going to take effort, and you just have to be willing to take the lumps, to take the different turns and overcome the obstacles that are inevitably going to come your way, because the road, the leadership road is one that is not straight almost ever. And you just have to be willing to bob and weave and to roll with the punches, because that's what it takes. And you just have to be present. You have to be introspective, and willing to look at the mirror and be honest with yourself, and making sure that your approach and that your motives are always in the right place, and that you're always aligned with what's best for the job. And if you do that, then you can't go wrong. And yes, there's going to be times that despite all your best efforts, it's just not going to work out, and you can't take that personally. And there's just sometimes there's certain circumstances, whether they're financial or they may just be personality, and that may just put that roadblock definitively up in your face. But you can't let that stop you. That's, again, just go back to what it is that you're responsible for, and just take care of your house and take care of your people. And if that's all you can do for your career, but you're successful at that, then that was a good career. And the people that work for you will always appreciate that, and you'll have their respect. And that's what this is all about. We got to remember that this job is about service. We're public servants. So we're there to take care of the public, and as company officers, we're there to take care of our crews. And that often gets kind of forgotten or underappreciated, but as a company officer, you need to make sure that you're taking care of your people, and that's doing everything that you can to make sure that they're prepared and they can be the best versions of themselves, not only on the fire ground, but also just in their day-to-day lives. Because you carry a lot of influence, and we're spending most of us now 24 hours at a clip with these people, and we eat together, we sleep under the same roof together, we go through tragedy together, we have these bonds that will rival that of our blood family members or our spouses. So you can't take that lightly. And as a company officer, you bear a lot of clout in their eyes, whether they're conscious of that or not. So you need to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be your best for them.
There's a few things that I wanted to touch on. You brought up some really good stuff. Again, one of the things that I've said over and over in the time that I've been doing these podcasts is, I tell my people, you're more than welcome to come to my office, knock on the door, and bring me an issue, but don't come at me with just an issue and that's it. I want a solution. I want to hear what you think the solution to that issue would be. And if I'm on board with it, I'll turn you loose with it. I'll make it yours. So I give that ownership back to them. And some of the things that I found that they come up with fairly decent solutions that either they're ready to go right out the door or they need to be polished a little bit. But because they had that ownership of here was the problem and this is what I came up with, and I asked my shift to help me. This is what we came up with. This is how we can solve this. We think this will work. What do you think? That goes back to building your credibility, your leadership credibility. You can't be the leader that I have to come up. You can't be the one that says I have to come up with every solution. I have to be the one that does this. I have to have my fingerprints on everything. I think when you allow to turn your people loose to solve problems or come up with a better way to do something, like you talked about repacking your hose lines to match your staffing. I think you'll find when the people who are closest to the problem have a hand in the solution, you're going to come up with a really good product. We had talked a lot about our hose lines in my particular county, and we ended up going back to 1.5 inch hose only because we knew we were going to get the gallons per minute out of it because the technology's changed, the science has changed, different materials. So we ended up going from 1 3/4 inch hose back to 1.5 inch hose. We dropped 20 pounds off a shoulder load, even though we still have a 4-person engine company. We've dropped 20 pounds off our shoulder load. This was something that I was in charge of the project, but I employed captains that are closest to the problem saying, hey, tell me what you come up with and we'll see if we can make it work. And that ultimately happened. They had the buy-in of that particular issue that was solved. And again, that builds your leadership credibility. People are going to understand that, hey, the chief is allowing me to come up with solutions to problems that are closer to me than they are to him. And they'll respect that. You're talking about you wanted to bring people on board with what you're doing. A lot of times you'll have to form relationships, and leadership, building relationships is a huge part of leadership. You'll have to build relationships not only with the people that you're working with in your stations and in your battalions, but also your bosses. It takes time to build that your credibility. It takes time to build that relationship. But when they understand that where you're coming from is a good place, and yeah, you can be a little over the top or very passionate about something, they're going to understand more where you're coming from, that it's not a selfish thing or it's not a complaining thing. It's hey, he's recognized a problem, and I know this guy. He wants to solve it. If he says there's a problem, then maybe we need to look into it and see where we can go with that. And like you said, there are times where you have the solution, but the funds aren't there. So that project's going to get shelved. What I've told people is, even if you're told no, go ahead and finish the project anyway. Get all your notes, get everything written down. So when they come back around the next fiscal year and say, hey, you were talking about XYZ project, what do you got? Hey, funny you ask. Here's the whole project done. So don't just give up, but continue to move forward and involve the people that you work with. Let them have fingerprints on it too. And I think that over time you build great relationships, you build up your leadership credibility, and people are going to respect where you're coming from. It's not all about you. It's about the team. It's about the organization.
And you touched on something that is so important. And if any chief officers are listening to this, and by that I mean chief of departments, chief of operations, the true policy makers, and the ones that are making that official approval at the end of all of this, I can't implore you enough to, if you want to empower your people, if you want them to have pride and ownership in the job, this is the way that you do it. If you have somebody who's a hard charger that is that genuinely cares about the job and that has taken the time out to not only identify a shortcoming or a problem, but has gone to the lengths to come up with a solution. And as long as that solution is viable and it's appropriate for your environment and for your community, and you have the financial ability to do so, allow it to happen. I'm not just saying to just blanket approve things, but allow it to go through its paces. Support that individual in their endeavors, because the easiest way to kill somebody's their drive and motivation is to shoot them down when they've taken the time and effort to go above and beyond. So it's empowering people is allowing them to do these sort of things, and you have to have that humility to recognize, to relinquish some of that control, to delegate that authority for them to explore these options and to allow them to make these changes, because it doesn't matter who it comes from. Yeah, and another thing that you touched on was so important to really emphasize here is that some of the things that I got along the way were, who's Lieutenant Pappa think he is? He's just to making these changes or doing all this work. He's just some junior lieutenant. Okay. Yeah, at the time, I was just a junior lieutenant, but I'm the one in the right front seat of that engine company. I'm the one that has to deploy that hose, and I'm the one that's responsible for that crew that's tasked with fire attack. So who has the most stake in the game, and who's got the most up-to-date experience and firsthand knowledge of of that system and that environment and what works and what doesn't work than the individual that's leading that nozzle team. That's where the chief of department, the chief of operations, you may be over a decade removed from that, so that's something you have to keep in mind as well too, is that a lot of things may have changed, or your mindset is in a completely different arena, as it should be. But this is where that tacit knowledge comes into play, and tapping into the people that have that are the boots on the ground, that have that firsthand experience, and that have that true skin in the game for what it is that's being discussed or looked at, or we're looking to make these changes in. So who better to tap into than those individuals that actually are hands-on with it? So I think that's something that needs to be put in play, and it's you have to be able to put that ego in check, and yes, you are the chief, yes, and you have the ultimate say, but take into consideration of how far removed you are from those operations, and the fact that yes, you have the ability to make changes or have the final say, but you're not impacted by it. It's those frontline company officers, those firefighters on the line that are the ones that have to then make do with that system or make do with those changes. So it's really important that you tap into those resources, and delegation is such a huge part of leadership, and empowering those underneath, and really inspiring those individuals to go above and beyond. And when people are allowed to make changes or to have a say in the decision making or a say in the process, then that's what truly develops that ownership. Because when they've got a piece of that pie, they're going to be so much more invested in it, because they've got skin in the game. They've been a part of it. So if you want compliance, if you want buy-in, if you want people to do what needs to be done, then give them that ownership. Allow them to do that. Allow them to be involved, and that's one of the best ways we want to talk about morale, and people always hammer on morale as being an issue. That's one of the best ways to improve morale, because when people feel like they're appreciated, when they feel like their opinion matters, when they feel like they're a part of the process, they're going to feel good about themselves. And I mean, that transcends the fire service into all aspects of life. So it's just such a key tenet of just life in general. When people feel valued, their spirits are going to be higher, and you're going to get so much more out of them, and the experience is going to be so much greater for everyone. And that's such a huge lesson for people to learn, or to remember, and to value it, because it's not just some empty leadership or management principle that you read in the book. That's real life. We got to remember that the fire service is just like anything else in life. It's about people. It's the people that we work with, and it's the people that we work for. Being the public. So we have to be able to have those soft skills, and to understand what makes people tick, and how to communicate with people properly. And again, it goes back to inspiring people, and giving them a sense of purpose, because that's how you really develop, that you cultivate that good morale, and how you develop that long-term success. Because these other things are just going to be little short-term, or band-aid fixes. And a lot of these things out there, like one of the things I get a laugh at is a lot of it's well-intentioned, and I'm not knocking for anybody that does it, because anytime we're trying to benefit the fire service or educate people, it's a positive thing. But often people will post a lot of these inspirational quotes or leadership quotes out there, and it's just little snippets. And yes, it's like the more that we read and the more that we hear, it's going to be a positive. But those little things are just little blips. Okay, yes, that may jog somebody's memory, or put a little lead in somebody's pencil, but that's not sustainable. You can't always have those quotes to put fuel in the gas tank. That long-standing motivation and that drive comes from purpose, from like true inspiration, and people understanding the mission, and that they truly believe in what it is that they're doing, and that they have a stake in the game. So that's what needs to be remembered, is you can't just do these superficial things, or just conduct yourself in a way that you're just scratching the surface, and going through the motions. It takes a lot of investment, and it's constant. You can't just make one change and expect to rest on those laurels and ride that wave and expect it to just carry you. It's a constant effort, and one that it never ends. Like you need to be invested in putting in the work from the day that you start, or the day that you get promoted, until the day you retire. Because anything less than that is unacceptable, and that's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah, I agree. You talk about, how do you build morale? The best way, like you said, to build morale is give somebody ownership of something. Make sure they understand that they are worth something to the fire service. They have worth. We talk about, you wouldn't have a firefighter go walk into the chief's office and say, "This is how I think you should do your budget." So it makes no sense for the fire chief, who may be 15 years, like you said, removed from riding the front seat of a fire engine or a ladder truck, to go into the station and go, "Here's the nozzles that I'm buying for you guys. Or here's the hose line. Here's how I want you to pack your hose lines." It all goes back to being able to relinquish some of that control. Take yourself out of the equation, and say, "Hey, what do you guys think about the hose lines and nozzles that we're using? What do you think about the hooks that we have on the truck? What do you think about the saws that we're currently using on the ladder truck or the rescue squad? Is there better stuff out there? And to have those guys give you that information, and then you say, you know what, do some research and bring to me what is out there. Let's take a look. You're going to give those guys, you're going to build their morales. Now they have ownership of a project that they can truly impact their way that they are operating on the fire ground with the tools that they're going to use. They're going to have a say in those tools. I never understood why a fire chief feels that he needs to drill down into the tactics. Even when I'm running a fire ground as an incident commander, I'm not jumping out of my car and pulling a hose line into the building. I'm just saying that, hey, that's where the hose line needs to go. That's my strategy. You guys are smart enough and talented enough and have trained enough to know how to get the hose off the fire engine and how to get it into the building and get it into the place that it needs to be. It's all about, not really trying to overstep your grounds, where your place in the organization is what you work on. But being able to show the guys that they matter, they have worth, they have something to bring to the table, and you're going to listen to it. And ultimately, if everything works out and institute it, you're going to build morale up tenfold. And you'll see that these guys, they'll have less and less to complain about because the fire chief's in their corner. They're allowing the guys in operations to make operational decisions based on their experience and where they are in the organization. So I think that the best way to build morale is to show the rank and file that they have worth and that their opinions matter and what they have to say should be listened to. And that goes a long way. Just being heard goes a long way. You don't necessarily have to institute what they're talking about, but the fact that they felt that they have been heard goes a long way. So I think a lot of the stuff that you're bringing to the table today is stuff that, not only you've lived by and that you've learned, it's the people that are listening to this show are saying, they're probably nodding their head right now saying like, absolutely. Or I wish our organization was that way, or I wish that people would hear, I've got all these ideas. But I think that once these chief officers, these higher ups start to relinquish a little bit of control over stuff that they don't really have to worry about, allow the people that are closest to the issue worry about that and come up with solutions, I think they'll find that when they're in their office, they can concentrate on the things that matter the most and the administrative side instead of worrying about what's going on with the operational side if you've got good people in place that are critical thinkers. But that's just kind of how I see everything from that 10,000 foot level as opposed to the 50 or 60,000 foot level of what the fire chief is looking at.
Absolutely. And the thing to remember is too that when these chief officers delegate these particular areas with operations, that now frees up their time and their mental headspace to now focus on more of the administrative aspects, which are what their job is truly all about. So now you can be a better fire chief because you're less occupied by the operational aspects. So now you can put more emphasis on the budget and maybe seeking out grant opportunities and other financial avenues to supplement your budget, because we all could use more money and more funding. And if we want to progress forward, that's one of our biggest stumbling blocks. So now if you have other people lightening your load and taking on some of these operational projects, now that frees you up to focus on the other things. So now, you're going to have more time to, network with the other, with the politicians to try and gain their support to, approve that budget increase, or you're going to have more time to write that grant, or to, just take those other avenues to improve the department as a whole. So it's not only going to make you look so much better and develop more loyalty from those that are under your command, because now you're showing them that you trust them. You're showing them that you value their opinion, that you trust them. And that goes a long, long way. And I've been blessed with, the chief that I have right now has really allowed me to kind of take the bull by the horn with these things and because I've had his support to execute these things and to explore these different options, it inspires me to keep doing it. So just because I got one project done doesn't mean I took my foot off the gas, because I had that success with the help of a lot of people, most notably my crew. But now it inspired me to keep going. So now we went from the hose on the trucks to the standpipe equipment and the standpipe SOP to, and now it's just like we did. You keep going, and you inspire them and motivate them to want to just keep making improvements and keep bettering the job. So the effects are just exponential, and again, you're going to develop so much more loyalty from the people that are beneath you, because you've shown them that respect and you've given them that opportunity. So it's the effects of doing that, by having that humility, that ability to delegate. It's the benefits are just tenfold, and are just, you're going to see that positive ripple effect for years to come. And the one thing I want to do is kind of circle back, because we kind of deviated away from the company officer level, but I kind of want to get back to the company officer realm, and just developing that high performing company and developing that unit cohesion. And where that all starts, it starts with the company officer. The company officer, and I just wrote I have a blog on my website. It's my training company is called Fireside Training, and I have a website that's firesidetraining.org, and I'm on the different social media platforms. Pretty low key on it. I pretty much do everything through the blog now. But I just did a pretty lengthy blog post on company officer leadership, and how to be a successful company officer from things that I've learned through my experiences, and some of the lessons learned the hard way. But it all comes down to the company officer. The company officer is the one that the buck stops with you. You set the tempo of the company. You are the one that kind of develops that company's personality, and so you have to lead by example. If you want the crew to be high performing, and if you have certain expectations for your crew, you better be embodying that 24/7, 100% of the time. It's that lead by example is just not some, a groundless leadership tenet. That's at the heart of everything. You can't expect other people to do or behave in a certain manner if you aren't embodying it yourself. And something to always keep in the back of your mind as a company officer, or as just a leader at any level, is that your peers, and especially your crew members, the ones that are under your command, they're always watching you. And you need to remember that if you take your foot off the gas, even with the slightest bit, they're going to know. They are most certainly going to know. Whether it's as something as benign as, your shirt being untucked, or, you coming in with a 5 o'clock shadow, they're going to pick up on it. And if you don't, address it quickly and, make sure that was an exception rather than the rule, you need to be practicing what you preach all the time. And yes, our slip ups and mistakes going to happen. It's like, just the other night, I went in for an overtime shift, and I got so caught up in, with my family before I left, I forgot to shave. But guess what? As soon as I realized it, I went and I shaved. So I mean, you just have to have that personal accountability and, that consistency to making sure that you're leading by example always, that you're not expecting your people to do anything that you're not doing yourself, or that you haven't done yourself personally. So that's where it all starts. And the next thing is what we touched on earlier. It's you have to, if training should be at the forefront of everything that a company does, but you have to inspire them. You have to show them the importance of training, why we need to train, why we need to train as much as we do, because we need to remind them of why we exist, what our purpose is, and what's at stake. because and through that inspiration is how you're going to develop that buy-in. And not only that, but we need to make sure that the training and the drilling is a positive experience. So often, people are gun shy about training because of what's been coined. I think the first time the origination of this term came from the Marine Corps, but it's this concept of training scars. Oftentimes people just have been, browbeaten or just put down, and training was kind of just used as a way to show you what you didn't know or how much somebody else knew, more than you. But training is for growth. It's an opportunity for us to develop as a crew, to develop as individuals, to collectively and individually build our skill sets so we can be more effective. And that needs to be a positive experience always. Training and drilling can never be punitive. And it needs to be an environment where people feel comfortable, that they put themselves out there and they're not afraid to make mistakes, because you want mistakes to happen on the drill ground. And let me, make sure to clarify that by saying, like, if something is gonna go wrong or somebody is going to fall short, you want it to be in the sterile and controlled environment of the drill ground, because the fire ground is unforgiving. The fire ground is very dynamic. It's fast paced. We don't have control over the different variables. So where we want it to happen and to identify those weaknesses and those shortcomings is on the drill ground. And we need to make sure that we're not putting people down and we're not making them feel ashamed or nervous of falling short, because we need to let them know that we're there to pick them up, that it's okay, that even us as company officers or chief officers, whoever's doing your training, that it's okay to make mistakes. And that's why a lot of times, especially if we're doing something new, I always go first. I do it first. That way, if something doesn't go according to plan, or or I make a mistake, it makes the crew feel a lot better and more inclined to participate and to take that fear away. Because if they saw that the lieutenant or the whoever, if they made a mistake and it wasn't a big deal and that they owned it and they said, and not only this, but you take every mistake or shortcoming and you take it and you spin it into a positive and say, hey, this is a common thing that can go wrong. Here's why it happened. Here's how we can prevent it. And if it happens to you, here's how you overcome it. So you turn it, you spin that negative of making a mistake or something going wrong, and you turn it into a positive learning experience. So now that shows humility on the trainer's part by again showing them that you're human and that you're not perfect or infallible, and that that mistakes are going to happen, and that they're okay as long as we own them and we look into why they happened, how they happened, and we take every step in our power to make sure that they don't happen again. And if you develop that environment and you show them that the training and the drilling is for them, it's to make sure that they're the best. They reach their full potential, that they're the best firefighter that they can be. And it's to make sure that they come home at the end of the shift in one piece, because their safety and well-being is our responsibility as company officers. So they need to know that everything that you're doing is coming from a place of legitimacy, that it's coming from a place of that it's well-intentioned, that you're doing it with their best interest in mind. So when they understand that and they truly believe it, you're gonna have that buy-in that's so often lacking, and they're not going to be so apprehensive or resistant to training. And as long as you keep the scope focused and you keep it everything realistic and you keep it manageable, and you take it, I think things being taken in small doses is a much better approach. it's going to be taken a lot better, and people aren't going to have that negative association or that negative connotation with training. And another thing that's often overlooked is that, Jocko, I know you follow Jocko and his work, and, he talks about this whole concept of flanking. And what he means by that is, not saying, okay, we're going to drill, or we're going to go out and train, and making it this whole formal to do. I do a lot of the bulk of my training is on the fly. It's off the cuff. It's opportunistic. We clear up from a medical call, or we clear up from an alarm, and we start talking about the building construction, and we start talking about, hey, if that apartment was on fire, and that bedroom where we treated that patient was the fire room, how would you stretch? Where would your drop point be? How would you navigate through this layout? And you start picking apart, how these buildings are constructed, because, every district has its nuance and has its own particular styles. And like for us, like those 3-deckers and 6 families, those are predominantly what we operate in. And they have a very standard layout. 9 times out of 10, they're going to follow the same footprint. So we take that opportunity to constantly drill in that size up, that understanding of the building construction and the building layout. So when we inevitably, roll up to one of those buildings on fire, and most of the time we have zero visibility, they're in such habit of sizing up the building and picking apart the construction features, and they can anticipate how it's going to be laid out. So when they do encounter that zero visibility, lights out situation, they kind of know and can anticipate what the layout's going to be, and they can better navigate their way through that occupancy, because they know how the rooms are oriented and configured. So that is so much of that should be really be the bulk of your training. And at half the time, they don't even realize that they're training. And you pose a lot of it as questions. It's like, hey, did you notice how that place was laid out? Or, hey, was there a well hole when we came up the stairs? Or, okay, if there was a well hole, is it going to be big enough to get your line through? And you start picking their brains, and it's, hey, how would you stretch the line if we had a fire in that back bedroom? And you get them talking. So it's, you're leading them, and you're kind of, you're throwing them those softballs. And before you know it, 15, 20 minutes has gone by, and you were just talking tactics the whole time. And and half the time they don't even realize what just happened. And then you just go off on your merry way, and there you go. You just logged another 20, 30 minutes of training. And, however many, you multiply that by however many calls you've done throughout the day. And before you know it, you've got your, a couple hours of training logged without even actually trying. And then, of course, that's not saying this is a substitute for hands-on drilling and practicing the different techniques and procedures that we have to do. Nothing replaces that, and we absolutely have to still do that. But that shouldn't be the primary focus the majority of the time. You can flank the guys with this, especially if you have. This definitely should be more the approach for as you have more senior firefighters, especially if you have a more tenured crew. They tend to appreciate this training more, because it doesn't seem as rudimentary, and then I find that this is a great opportunity for you to learn as a company officer. If you got a more senior crew, and now you're picking their brain about how they would go about certain things, or especially if you have people that have trade backgrounds, and you can start picking their brains about the different construction features and how things are laid out. And the more you can tap into people's experiences and people's skill sets and abilities, and bring that out of them and get them talking, and them leading that drill or that training session, the better off you're going to be, and the more into it they're going to be. And that's such a huge part of it is your job as a company officer or as a leader is to identify those strengths and those unique skill sets and the backgrounds of all the people that you work with, and to allow them to utilize those talents, to empower them to bring those to the table, because that's what makes a crew, is everybody has a different background, a different upbringing, their different strengths and weaknesses. So if we can promote those strengths and cover the blind spots and those weaknesses, that's what makes a real team. That's what makes a true fire company, and that's how you become a high performing unit, is by promoting those strengths and covering each other on each other's weaknesses, and that's where this all comes from. And there's no better way to build trust, to build unit cohesion, to enhance performance than through training and drilling. That's where the heart of that, all of that comes from. And another thing, Pierre, that this is kind of like my secret weapon, and for leadership is humor. This is, in my opinion, and I know anybody who's listening to this can share the sentiment, but this is the best job in the world. I mean, there's no job in my eyes that's better than this. So we have fun doing it, and I think that's another thing that, like, yes, we still need to be professionals, and especially as officers, and the higher up you go up the chain of command, there's a certain decorum that you need to hold, and a certain standard that you have to uphold. But you can still have fun doing the job. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to smile. The more levity you bring, obviously if appropriate to the situation, the more relaxed people are going to be, the more resilient that they'll become. And that's always been my go-to, is to keep people laughing, to keep things lighthearted. And it just makes everything so much more enjoyable. And it further develops that relationship and that bond together, because the more you're having fun, the more you're laughing, the more people's guards get dropped down, and the more you get to see that person for who they are. And that's so much of this job is being able to read people and to understand what makes them tick and what they're all about. And so much of what gets lost, I think, in these shortcomings that leaders and company officers have, is they don't know their people truly. And because we have such intimate relationships with our coworkers, because again, we're cooking meals and eating together at the same table, we're sleeping under the same roof, we're going through all of these hardships together. We're spending a great deal of our lives with these people. So, you're going to see the best and worst of these people throughout your time, and you need to know, everything about them, about their personality, about their home life, about their hobbies, their interests, what their learning styles are, all of these different aspects of what makes them who they are. Because until you understand that whole dynamic, you can't lead them to the best of your ability, because, you can't just have a cookie cutter approach to how you lead people and to how you lead fire companies, because everybody's going to be different. And, they're going to be different. People are going to be receptive to different approaches, to different styles, whether that be learning styles or just, what have you. So you need to be able to understand just the different aspects of this human dynamic, so you can properly adapt and modulate your approach to get the best out of this person. And once you do that, and then again, that shows the person that you're invested, that you're taking the time to get to know them, that you're taking the time and the effort to modulate your approach, to make sure that they're receiving the information in the way that best resonates with them, and you're taking those extra steps to make sure that they're successful. And that just goes a long way. When people feel like they're being appreciated and that they're being seen for who they are, and that you're doing everything that you can to accommodate that, when you show them that respect and you show them that level of caring and effort, it's going to be reciprocal. They're going to then do the same thing for you, because if it's that, one hand washes the other. And that's going to develop that loyalty. That's going to develop that true relationship and that bond. And they'll go to bat for you, because they know that you're willing to do it for them. And it just, again, it takes time and consistency. And over time, they're going to see, what you're all about, and that your intentions are pure, and that you're really there for their best interests. And once you achieve that, the sky's the limit. The sky is literally the limit.
That's great stuff, and from a company officer's perspective, being able to put that information out there for people that are looking to come through the ranks, to be able to understand your people and to see the human side of them, and to draw from them their strengths, to make sure that they feel they're part of the shift and included on the shift is huge, and that brings the whole shift together to be able to work with each other as well as perform on the fire ground. We're at the hour and 20-minute mark. I mean, we've had some just fantastic stuff, Nick, and I appreciate you being on the show and giving that company officer's perspective as opposed to the chief officer's perspective, because I think that's so important, and being able to just kind of lay it out there. So for people who are looking that they want to move forward in their career, to kind of have an understanding or a glimpse of what a company officer thinks about, or what they should be thinking about in order to build relationships and become a good leader, to start that process of building leadership credibility. You brought a lot of good stuff to the table. So again, Nick, I really appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule to be on my show, to put down some words of wisdom. So go ahead and before we sign off, you talked about your blog. Where can people find your blog, what the website is, so people can tune in and take a look at what you're writing?
All right, and one closing sentiment I just want to leave with everybody is that I'm sure there's people listening from all ranks and all positions within the fire service, and this is a leadership podcast, and you don't need rank to be a leader. Okay, leadership and rank are not synonymous. Okay, one does not guarantee the other. So leadership it exists at all levels. And if you want to be a leader, the time to do that is not when the promotional exam is announced. You need to lead at every level. Lead at every level and at all times. So be that person now. And there's, no matter where you are in the fire service, from probie, or backstep firefighter, all the way up the chain of command, you can have an impact. Okay, just understand your lens and your scope, and and if you stay within that, and you recognize that, and you control your controllables, and you do the right thing, that's what leadership is about. And you'll build that capital and build that reputation. And then if you do care to rise up the chain of command and promote, then it's going to be that you'll be that much more successful, because you've done the work, and it's not just for real now because you pin the bars on your collar. So everybody can make a difference, and leadership exists at all levels. And there's no such thing as Aaron Field says, there's no such thing as informal leadership. It exists at all levels. So as far as where you can get a hold of me and take a look at the things that I've done and currently doing, it's firesidetraining.org. It kind of encompasses all of that. I've also I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I've got a very, very low profile presence on there. So everything I'm pretty much doing now as far as content is through the website and through the blog. I also have a book that's going to be coming out through Fire Engineering and should be announced any day now. We're just waiting for it to come back from the printer. So pretty excited about that. And I'll be out at FDIC in August, and that'll be the big release of the book. And you can get a hold of me through the website, through social media, or at firesidetraining@yahoo.com is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me through any of those avenues, and I'd be happy to talk to you through there, or if you prefer to talk on the phone, which is my preference. I'm a little bit more old school when it comes to that. I'd much rather just you pick up the phone and have a conversation, because there's so much lost just in text. And I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about anything that we've spoken about today, or anything else for that matter. So my door is always open, so to speak. So that's where you can get a hold of me. And Dave, I just want to thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure as always, and I hope the conversations that we had today will be a source of inspiration or a source of guidance for somebody who is a company officer or is aspiring to be one.
Absolutely, and I have no doubt that it will. So again, Nick, thanks for being on the show, and be safe out there. And for everybody else, tune in to this particular show. Will be coming up in July. If you haven't had a chance yet, go back and listen to some of the past episodes. They're all good, in my opinion. So with that, Nick, again, thanks for being on the show, and be safe out there.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dave. You too.